Hi there, welcome to the Crazy House World Championship. We will watch one of the two remaining games from the losers bracket. These two games will decide who makes it through to the candidates. And tonight we're watching pknm versus, let me see, this is versus unjournakamura. I think, yep. pknm, unjournakamura. Two strong players. One of them will make the candidates. Let's follow my fellow countryman pknm. Playing white in this first game. As you can see, pknm has a slight advantage coming into this match. He has a 92.5 against 63.5 lead in their previous encounters. I expect this to be a very, very close match, and as you can see, they are evenly matched when it comes to rating, 24-64. pknm is a solid player, especially with white, so I expect some positional maneuvering in the white games. He's not the theoretical type of player. Unjournakamura, a bit more aggressive, knows his openings really well. Now let's see what he has prepared. He decided to put his bishop outside the pawn chain, as did pknm. Trading here on d6 gives black some control here in the center. It gives black an semi-open c file, but also with the knight on d7, this move is kind of awkward for black to respond to. I don't like the placement of the queen on c7. She's sort of under fire here from the bishop, and I expect white maybe to, play rook c1 and open the c file. So this should be slightly better for white, and as you can see, pknm likes this. He's played very fast in the opening, just natural moves, still above 3 minutes. They're playing with 3 minutes plus increment, 2 seconds, and the player who reaches 5.5 points first is through. They're playing best out of 10 games. Welcome to those of you who are viewing this. Not so many this far, but I hope more will join. So, unjournakamura spending a lot of time here. I suppose trading here in d5 could actually benefit black, because it could get a pawn in hand and start hammering the white king's position. So it's about choosing the right opportunity here to open the c file as white. With the knight on e4, it's not so easy to play h3 and maybe force the issue here on the king's side, but he goes for taking on d5 anyway. And black will need to spend a tempo taking back on d5. Maybe white can make use of the 7th rank here somehow. I don't quite see it. So maybe black will take on d2. What's the idea here? Okay, he goes for the king immediately, using the bishop instead. Maybe white missed that. In order to break through, he would need a pawn would threaten to take the rook, but he would also need a knight, because after taking the rook and the knight it takes one more move to get to the black king. So it's too slow. So what is the idea here for white? How is he going to defend this? Well, let's say the bishop takes here. Maybe simply bishop at f1. pknm is a very good defender. It's very hard to mate him. I don't quite see it for black after this move. Apparently, unjournakamura has seen something here, but because if you take here, the knight takes, and this bishop is a tremendous defender. And white is a piece up here, so black had better find something. If you take on d5, simply bishop at h3 should suffice. And bishop h3, king takes, knight here, go back. I just don't see it for black, but maybe I'm blind. So you can go to the corner here. And now what? This seems like a winning position for white. I mean, where is the black attack? Let's say after knight f4. Black has nothing. pknm taking his time just to make sure he doesn't fall for any cheap tricks. Well, this is a very safe continuation also. Knight f4, I like knight f4. Attacking the queen, controlling g2 once more. Well, this is fine too. Some desperate checks here by black, but this is over. Just a matter of not messing things up here in the end. f3 is nice because it creates some luft for the white king. Great control here by white. Black doesn't have enough pieces. And now he has a huge threat here to deal with. So, nice start there for pknm. Hi there, Zaraza. Nice to see you. Do we have any more viewers? Well, one more at least. Two. Okay. You are all welcome. This is pknm's pet line, and I don't like it at all, I have to say. It's just too passive, but Playing a bad opening well could be better than playing a good opening badly. So maybe unjournakamura has prepared something here. I'm not sure. He hasn't played super fast in the opening, so maybe pawn at b5 isn't prep. It caught pknm by surprise anyway, but no, it wasn't prep. If it was, unjournakamura would have played by now. So let's see what happens here. The players are on their own. I'm just fine. 2 great games here this weekend that I can stream. Tomorrow we will see. Let's check the calendar. It's Zixon, another fellow countryman of mine, versus Charkvos for the last place in the candidates. If you compare the pawn on b5 with the pawn on f6, I'd say the pawn on f6 is making more sense because it strengthens the future position of the black king. Although that pawn was hanging, so I wonder how well planned this was for black. Maybe bishop b4, and in case of c3 you simply take and then pawn e4. Could that be the way to go? Yeah. It seems as if pknm and I are thinking alike in this position. So this knight was trapped, gives his life for the pawn here, and that pawn will come in handy because if you take with the queen, there's a fork here on g5, and if you take with the pawn instead, pawn at g7 would be really annoying because the knight on h6 is hanging. And this is starting to look a bit awkward for black. Interestingly, white chose to put the bishop here because he senses that the queen will be trapped after either queen g6 or queen f5. Simply knight h4, and then a black pawn, black queen might land here on d8 after it's been captured. So black opts for a queen sack just to finish the development, and there's still the fork here to worry about. I wonder how quick pawn at g5 is. Pawn at g5, take here. What do you take on f3 and then take here? There's a mate threat on e7. This is an interesting move, threatening queen e7, and if you put something here, white simply will take and put the knight on c7, I think, disrupting the black development. Oh, he didn't have a knight, sorry. I thought he had a knight. Now what? So if you get a knight, knight c7 will probably happen. I think black is one tempo shy here. Somehow. Well, maybe take on d3. Take here. Take back. At least you're not threatening mate anymore. This is shaky for black, really shaky. Probably knight c7, yeah. Because if you go to e7, bishop g7 might be strong. Bishop g7, then take on f6. Also pawn at e5, of course. pknm really low on time here with bad position, trying to hang on. But this is one for white. Taking with the knight, allowing pawn e5 wasn't any better. At least the knight is controlling f6 here. White has plenty of material to spare. Bishop g5 probably. And you can't go to e6 because of queen e7, so you need to go in this direction. Maybe just take h6. If the king takes, you have queen g5, and this you just pick up the rook, I think. Or maybe queen g7. Okay, so apparently he found some other mate. Yeah, the king is trapped. And we see 1-1. So pknm clearly stronger with white. What do you say in the audience? Who do you think will win this match? Welcome everybody. Unjournakamura playing a different setup here. He abandoned the symmetrical d4, d5 line, playing some improvised setup, which does make sense because this bishop is strong. I think you'll avoid playing d5 in these lines. Maybe h6 to try to lure white to trade on f6 and simply castle. And white postpones the decision to castle. Meanwhile, black prepares to push the e-pawn. And white kind of regretted his setup in the opening. He spent the tempo on advancing the e-pawn, which does make the bishop on b7 less strong. One way of doing this would be to push the d5, the d-pawn to d5, just to make this even weaker. But with the queen on e2, it's always interesting to try to pry lines open. And how is pawn takes, bishop takes, pawn takes g7? Yeah, well spotted, pknm. Because bishop takes here, pawn takes, rook here, and pawn h7 looks very annoying for black. White will get a ton of wood for the queen. And the question is, what do you recapture with? If you take with the knight, I suspect knight f4 is slightly annoying. hitting the queen and the pawn on g2. So yeah, he decides to pick up the piece with the queen. And this threatens to pick up the rook and then take back on f3. So I suppose you need to take on c6. And this isn't quite what black was bargaining for. Although the white queen has a lack of good squares to retreat to. Queen f3, maybe bishop g4. Very interesting position here. Black has a pawn for the piece, but he's better coordinated than white is and also has an advantage on the clock. Very natural centralization here by white, hitting weak points in the black position and also protecting g4. But what about knight takes and queen takes here? Any minute now I expect the queen to sacrifice herself just to stabilize the position. Yeah, he decides to take on f5 and staying out of, keeping this as an umbrella, not allowing the queen to pin the bishop on d3. And white has a dangerous attack here going. Although watch out for, let's say, rook takes pawn here, queen g4 takes the pawn on g6. So maybe pawn e6 is better. He does it with check. And this covers any potential checks on this diagonal. pknm only 3 seconds left. And he found a forced mate here. Pawn here, rook e1. His mate. Nice defense by Unjournakamura. I'm a bit interested here in the position, let's say somewhere around here. How does the computer evaluate this? Better for white. Better for white. Better for white. Better for white. And that was a very interesting possibility. Yeah, this is the nutcracker. Pawn here. Look at this. Because if the bishop takes, you just take f7. But what happens after this? Yeah, you take g6, of course. Yeah. But when exactly pawn b7? Not so easy to find. And after this, black was simply better. Okay. Let's see what happens here. pknm switching to something else. Both players thinking early in the game. And isn't black a little weak on the dark squares here? If white could connect these two, a move like knight c5 maybe could be annoying. But a move like pawn e5 is always interesting. Maybe bishop c5 at some point, but you would like to connect these two. So if the pawn takes, you have knight f6 check. Maybe this is really strong, by the way. How is black going to defend this? Maybe queen e7, pawn d7, king here. Very tricky. I don't like the black setup here. Knight e5 was a nice find. Maybe bishop c5, bishop d6. Simply take here, bishop takes, pawn advances to c3. Well, it's not so easy to crack this. And if white slips up, this pawn is a sitting duck on d7. Rook to g8 looks natural. Protecting g5 and obviously also pointing the gun down the g file. And what's this? You can't take here because of pawn f6 mate. This looked like a very bad decision. And this bishop is covering f2, so there's no smothered mate here. So no queen g1 now. Only a couple of seconds left. Do you take here on b8? Is that really a forced mate? No, of course you take the rook. And now actually black is threatening queen g1. But a lot of things happening here with check. Maybe bishop f5 to close this exit. He chose to check here instead, and now the queen can take on b7. 3-1 unjournakamura. And pknm leads a win here with white. Otherwise, I think this match is over. unjournakamura continuing his bishop b7 line. pknm trying another setup just to neutralize the bishop. And a little tactical trick there. Because if the pawn takes, you have bishop e3. And there is no way pknm will take here. Instead he goes here, and now he threatened g7, he threatened the knight. But queen g5 was an excellent response. Covering here, attacking the knight, and also eyeing the pawn on g2. Why not play bishop e3? Because white doesn't have any diags to put on f2. And if you need to go to the corner and the queen takes here, actually black is threatening mate on g3 with a knight. I guess you pick up the knight. Not sure why black chose to take here. Well, he intends to, after rook takes, knight h3 maybe, forcing the king to f1. Well, why not play the pawn to e3 while you have the chance? That will be an excellent beachhead for the coming aggressions. Actually, black might even consider knight h3. Knight h3, pawn takes, pawn e3, pick up this. Well, maybe it's too creative. Threatening to take here, actually. How's the material? Black is ahead of pawn. And the white position is rocky. Well, at least this defends h2 and attacks the pawn on c7. And white might consider checking on... I had an idea here. Check on h3 with a knight, pawn takes, and then take with the queen on f3. Queen takes, bishop takes. Maybe. Maybe it's too violent. Knight here. Probably a good position for the knight. Threatening c3, also supporting a pawn on f4. Pawn f4 looks good. Trapping this bishop. And pknm is barely hanging on in this game. He probably needs to give up his queen at this point. But with the king on e3 and knight f5 followed by knight d5 coming, surely white is dead. And knight here picks up this pawn, and then you can pick up a pawn, one more pawn here. Can you say governor? No, I can't. It's quite impossible. Can you? Trading off defenders. Well, this won't help much. I suppose you just take knight g7. You can move the king away to safety. Let him have the queen. You just keep on. Maybe take d3. Or something else. A bishop here maybe, just to get the pieces on the board and gain some control. Actually, taking here is a bit annoying because you have the rook here and pawn e7. Maybe I'm just hallucinating. No, I'm certainly not British. No, I'm Swedish. So I don't speak English at all. And he found a mate, knight b2. Impressive. In unjournakamura, 4-1. And I think pknm needs to work on his black openings. This is just not good enough at this level. So he chose to develop his knight to f6 rather than h6 this time. But this is overly provocative, I think. Hoping to play, and then bishop takes, and then knight g8, I suppose. Well, I expect maybe knight d7. White might even consider queen h5 and then take on h6 with the queen and place the knight on g8. Or am I too optimistic? Maybe queen takes d4 is a problem. Well, black is still in the game. There is a danger of overextending when you place pawns on the 7th rank. Maybe black can simply play pawn g7. No. What does black do now if you go here? Do you play pawn d2? Is that the idea? Yeah. So nifty little defense here by pknm. Knight takes, pawn d2. And I hope he wins this game, just to keep the match alive. And putting the pawn on e3 was certainly not what white was hoping to do. So what do you do here? You could maybe play bishop g7 just to connect these two guys and get some protection for g8. But this bishop is maybe getting trapped by h4. So black decides to give white the knight for g8. How do you protect g8? Do you go bishop g7 now? Oh, he puts another knight on f6. Well, this knight is threatening the queen. Maybe black will have the time to play pawn d6, pawn d6 after this. Can black defend his way out of this? I, for one, would like to get pawn d6 in. Yeah. And I suppose you don't dare to take... Well, he's certainly not a coward, this pknm. He hopes to find shelter here in the corner. White hoping to open up the h-file, but this launches a counterattack, and pawn d2 decides matters. White needed to sacrifice the queen, otherwise after king d1, knight c3 followed by knight b2 would be coming. And this is just over, isn't it? After knight here, and queen check, it's soon mate. So, and black can use his knight on f6 even. And pretty soon we will have a mate. 4-2. And pknm is back in the match. Yeah, he noticed that playing knight c3 early gave black the opportunity to pin the knight. So instead he just develops... I think that was a wise decision. And with the knight here blocking the bishop, maybe you would consider playing a3, yeah? Because where is this knight going? Well, certainly it's not going forward. Although you could play it this way, over to the king side. That's something I myself play a lot. Just maneuver it over to the king side. And this makes the black pawn position a bit rigid. I don't like it. Bishop here. Black will have some chronic problems with the d6 pawn, I think. It's not quite worth the semi-open c-file. It's hard to push the pawns in the center. If you push the d pawn, this bishop is out of play. So this should favor white, I think. Also, white is up on time. Slightly bad coordination for black in this position. Sometimes maybe white can go for knight b5, trying to force bishop drop, passive bishop drop on b8, or how is black going to defend this? Do you push the e5 pawn? That makes the light squares really weak. For instance, pawn here. Can you take the pawn? Maybe. You can even take on d6 maybe. Knight takes d6. Queen takes and pawn takes here. How was that? We can check it afterwards. Maybe it was good for white. But this is probably good as well. Although not quite as clear. So where's this knight going? In this direction. You can take on h7 and pick up the knight. If it goes here, maybe you play h3. I would certainly look at h3 here. Because you do want the knight here as white for f5 maybe. Sometimes d5. With the bishop in hand, you could have played bishop takes here, king takes, bishop f7. But you don't have a bishop. Interesting. I didn't foresee this move. What is the idea here? So now this bishop is awake. Okay, you got a pawn for f6, but black can just leave the queen hanging, and now after bishop takes here, bishop f3 could be really annoying sometimes. Taking on e7 is really slow. Maybe you pick up the rook. Wasn't bishop takes h1 better here? Maybe not. But this... How is this? Okay, you couldn't take with the queen because of rook d2 mate. That was neat, but... Aha. Wait a minute. So white doesn't get to the black king, but can black get to the white king? If you play rook here, white will lose after queen e1. Rook takes, pawn takes, and there's a rook mate here on d2, if I'm not wrong. So you need a diag to cover all the squares for the rooks. Also, this is a strong place for this bishop. Good defense there by pknm. And he has a huge material lead. And maybe these knights are stuck here. So probably rook f1. Oh, he can pick up the pawn maybe. Bishop here. This is starting to look very good. Pawn e7. Isn't this winning? Bishop here, probably covering a lot of squares. Oh, why did it take on g1? Isn't this dangerous? No, it's not, probably. Cold-blooded defense here by pknm. And now the checks have ended. Time to retaliate. The white king is safe. And the bishop takes g7 is coming. 4-3. All right. Nice defense there by pknm. Let's have a quick look. Was there something for black? Very tricky position here. Yeah, bishop at c3. Queen at c1. Oh, there's a mate here. Knight g1. Yeah, and that wasn't so hard to find, knight g1. But after this, white was in the driver's seat the whole way, I think. Yep. Okay. Oh, sorry. This is the current position. And white choosing another setup here. Giving up a piece, which black hasn't taken yet. When we are back live. Notice that you need to be careful here not to play e5 because of knight takes e5, because if you take here, the black knight will retreat to d7, having won a pawn for black. And knight takes f2 is always interesting here. Maybe it's a threat, even. Also provides some protection in the center. So do you play a6 just to try to force white to trade and let this bishop out on this long diagonal? Interesting decision here by black. He just takes some space in the center, possibly making the queen look a bit stupid here on e2. I'm sure white was hoping to advance the pawn at some point. And having blocked this pawn, it's not so interesting maybe to take with the bishop anymore, because the diagonal is blocked. Ooh, that was a tough decision to take. So knight g7, king here simply. The knight covers h6, so the knight has to go somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, black can make use of this diagonal. And there's knight f4, unless white is careful. And what is this? I'm not quite sure. That was a piece, at least. That I'm sure of. That just looks like a bad piece sack, if you ask me. And this is worse than a line that I was discussing before. Because now black has an extra knight. I don't understand this. And I think unjournakamura doesn't understand it either, because he's spending a lot of time here. Something went wrong. And maybe simply rook. I was thinking rook g8 here. A lot of nasty checks could come. Although we didn't play it. I would have been a bit hesitant opening up the e file here for white, because pawn at e7 is a threat. Although the king is quite safe over here, but the knight at g4 is hanging. Maybe, well, maybe knight at e5. Yeah. One move worth considering is h5. Just to gain control. The rook will be controlling h7 and h6. But he's determined to make use of this on the g file. And I suspect knight at h3 was a threat. How about pawn f3? Wasn't pawn at f3 really, really good? This does look good as well. Maybe you can you take here, play pawn f3, something. So now you have to look out for what's this? Maybe you take with a knight. Maybe you check. Knight f3 check. Well, if you need to look out for. Okay, yeah, there's the mate. There's the mate. Nice one, pknm. This is 4-4. I think pknm played really well there in the end. Yeah, as I said, taking on d4 was just bad, it seems. Pawn e6, well, yeah, maybe. And here I suggested I said pawn f3, but yeah, bishop f3 looks good. But pushing the pawn here seems okay too. Yeah, black is simply so much better. White doesn't have anything, and this is indeed a forced mate. Very nice finish. Go crazy house. And we see the same opening as before, and White choosing the same setup in this game. This is new though. Playing bishop d6 didn't bring black any success. And did he waste the tempo moving the bishop? Yes, he did. This is a little offside. Okay. So we have a positional struggle ahead of us. Maybe white is hoping to play knight e4 with threats like knight takes and knight g7 check, picking up this bishop. Was there anything wrong with knight e4 here? Maybe he was too quick to playing queen e2 actually. I think maybe he missed an opportunity. Well, knight e4 still seems okay. I was thinking at first bishop takes, queen h4, but when the bishop takes here and the pawn takes, you have knight g2 check. So that's not so good. White needs to be careful here. Maybe queen g7. Hitting two pieces. And also, let's say you play, no, maybe bishop at f6. No, no, queen g7. How is queen g7? Because white had some interesting checks like knight f6, taking h5. Maybe queen e5 is good too. Cheers. And here's the dilemma in Crazy House. What to do with a queen on a crowded board. The light pieces just dominate the queen. Taking on c7 is so slow. And probably just losing. At least now white is threatening something. And maybe white is hoping to, at some point, just give the queen for a knight, get back the two pieces and try to damage the black king position. Here could be an opportunity to give up the queen, maybe. Let's say take here. Take, I don't know. It's just not enough, is it? So getting back two pieces for the queen now, but The initiative is with black, who can play maybe bishop g2. In this position, f3 looks okay for white, I suppose. Ooh, okay. Not sure about this. And why didn't he just take on g2? The rook was covering e3. And it looks like pknm is about to turn this game around. He won't be taking this knight. Instead, he'll use his pieces to cover some important squares. But now it's starting to look bleak. Again, pawn f3. I'm afraid this is over for pknm. He doesn't have any counter attacking chances. But he's still alive, and Unjournakamura is low on time. And surely going for the d3 square doesn't help black, because white has 1, 2, 3 pieces defending d3. This is still interesting. And the knight is covering d3 as well. This is unclear. White has set up a nice defense here. And I think this will decide. Oh, he blundered a whole queen. Damn. White is winning. Just put the pieces on the board and you're winning this game. Pawn e7 should decide this game, but he didn't go for it. Why didn't he go for it? And there's no mate with one knight. And now, no, what did you do? Oh, this is such a mess. Now white is winning again, isn't he? Yep, he is. So pawn here and just move the king away. And white is winning again. And now he has a ton of knights. So knight h6 was winning immediately. Why did you waste the queen? Bishop takes here, threatening mate on h7. And finally, pknm won. I'm sure both players missed a lot of chances there in the end. And in this position, the computer likes queen and g5 that I suggested, but this is a bad position for white. No coordination whatsoever. And indeed, as I suggested, queen takes f6 is the most promising for white here. And this is simply bad. And as I suggested, also bishop at g2 makes more use of the light square weaknesses. This allowed f3. And why didn't it take on g2? It's just a piece. So this was a game full of blunders. Look, black is still better after blundering his queen. And now black is clearly winning. Putting the pawn on c4 was nonsense. But black is winning, black is winning. Black is still winning, blundering a queen. But this was one queen too many. And here, yeah, pawn e7, just as I said. Why not? Actually, here, after d5, black is better. And black is winning again. And white is winning. And knight at h6 was a forced mate. Standard book mate. And did black miss anything here in the end? No. Okay. So, sorry for looking at the previous games. What do we have here? Same opening. And in this time he took the piece. Interesting. Immediately giving it back. And this is interesting. Very interesting. This looks good for black, doesn't it? Oh, we're back live. And did pknm find something here? The king is out on the board. He needs to go to g3, because if you go here, black can simply take on g2. You need to go here, but bishop f2, king takes, queen takes, and having the king here on the fourth rank isn't exactly yummy, yummy. King h3, only chance, I'd say. What happens then? Do you take the rook, maybe? Well, I wouldn't feel comfortable with the queen on with the king on h3, but it's not so easy to mate it. I would like to have a heavy in hand, yeah. Bishop takes. If white takes here, maybe rook at g3 is a move. Certainly not so easy to mate the white king here. bringing this bishop into play. But this is an interesting move. I wonder if you check, just to take with check on f5. The idea for white is bishop takes and simply queen e7 mate, because this knight is pinned. Wow, this is tricky. This is really tricky. Let's say knight here. But you can go king g3 maybe. And now what? Maybe rook g4. No, yeah, rook g4, bishop takes, knight takes back, with the threat of bishop f2. Played it in this position instead. One move too late, I suspect. Yeah, because this is over. Okay, let's see. It's 5-5. We go into the tiebreak. And, sorry. Knight f2 check was the right move already here. And then rook g4. Yeah, this is the simplest. I was suggesting this. Oh, there's rook e7. Okay, I missed rook e7. But in this position, knight f2 was winning apparently. The idea is this. Okay, let's look at the tiebreak. Unjournakamura switching to kingside fianchetto. And pknm knows his way around these positions, quickly creating weaknesses in the black camp. Isn't taking on g6 good already? I would be really scared with black here if white just took on g6. Maybe taking on g6 is interesting in this position as well. Unjournakamura, sorry, pknm just playing it positionally. And I think this is sort of his weakness. He doesn't look for the killer moves sometimes, and thus missing some promising opportunities. He likes to have a nice and safe position, which he does have. So probably capturing and capturing again, putting maybe the bishop on f3, or do you push the pawn? And this opens up the e file, threatening rook at e8. So black needs to be really careful here. Also, another idea is to take the knight and put the pawn on e7. This looks super bad for black. Black in big trouble here. Some way he needs to connect these guys. What do you do? Move the bishop somewhere. Close the e file maybe, but d5 could be coming. Let's say d5, bishop takes, queen takes, and then simply bishop at f3 again. It just looks like white is so well coordinated in that position. But maybe black could have just taken on f3, sacrificed the queen and played something like knight h4. So maybe it wasn't as good as I thought it was. Pawn at e4 looks promising, doesn't it? Still have the chance probably to take on e6 and push the d pawn. Now black doesn't have a bishop to put on d5 anymore. And here you notice that knights are actually not as good at defending as bishops are. People always think that knights are superior to bishops. I would say that in general, bishops are more versatile and all-round. They're good at blocking, defending, attacking. I like bishops. I'm not so sure white picked the right way here, because the bishop is not as good here on g4. Doesn't attack this knight anymore. And that gave black time to just take on g2. And I suppose knight here. Maybe bishop g2. Now there's an eternal threat of heavy on h1 mate. And the question is, does white spend a tempo on moving the rook? Yes, it did. And this is a nasty move. Bishop g8. Pawn landing on f7. Just a flurry of moves coming from white here. Maybe rook h3. Trying to create some threats here also on the h file. Ouch. Here's the rook coming for black, isn't it? Well, at least you can take here now. But this is awfully close to mate. Awfully close to mate. Oh, what a thriller. Where is the mate? Is there a mate? And the king can run this way. Boom, 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 boom. Touchdown coming. Reaching f7. Is it safe? I think it's safe. Wow, what a game. Queen g8 and the king is supporting it. Isn't that lovely? That's a picture you can hang on the wall. Wow, I'm sure unjournakamura missed something there. He must have missed something. And speaking of missing things, this just looks so good. How is the d5 idea I had here? Maybe it's not so good after all. I saw that maybe I was thinking maybe here. Okay, it's not as good as I expected. So he played it calmly. One more. Yeah, and bishop g4 was not so good. He should have taken away this knight while he had the chance, because this is good for black. Very dangerous. But this gave white the chance to crash through. And this was just too greedy. You need to spend time on your defense. I was suggesting rook h3, which is also good. Creating some threats here on the h file. Oops, sorry. Let's go back to the game. We can look at the previous game later. So, what's this? Tactical trick. Queen takes, knight c2. Black won an important pawn. And still, knight at e2. And this is a very clever move, because if the pawn takes, you have pawn e2. And this position, my friends, this should be winning for black. Look at these two lovely bishops defending and attacking. What did I say about bishops? I like bishops. White digging deep here, trying to find some sort of attack. But I think the king is pretty safe here in the center. What if he does just take here? We can take on f1 as well. Sure, there's a check, but the king is safe here, isn't it? Bishop is covering, knight is covering. And if you take here, also the king is safe here. Both squares covered. And c8 should be safe. This is winning for black. There's the immediate threat of knight h3. Pawn takes, queen g2. Or knight h3, king takes, and rook e1. So white needs to find something that just isn't there. Yeah, Well spotted. PKNM has one of every piece. That's the most balanced piece holding I've ever seen. And obviously there are more threats also. Knight at e2 is a threat. Even rook h1 followed by bishop takes here is a threat. And the white attack will be over pretty soon. Well, I suppose the knight takes. Oh, he took with the king. Yeah. The king can go to c8. Both squares here defended by the bishop and the knight. The white attack is just an illusion. Tick tock, tick tock. And simply king c8 should do it. Covering e2 at least, threatening mate here on b7, but and knight e2, queen takes, and black cannot recapture because of knight e7, king b8, and knight takes d7 mate. So don't fall for that trick. Please, please, don't fall for it. So what should you do? Maybe you could go bishop c6, simply taking the knight should suffice. You can always take on c6 since the queen can't take back. And what's this? This is, yeah, it's nothing. Just a bunch of knights in hand. You can take here probably. Knight takes, the king is sufficiently safe. And notice that you can just go here. Black is happy with a draw. And obviously white is not happy with the draw. 6.5 is enough for black. And come on, just play knight f4, get rid of the bishop and mate. Don't get nervous. Pawn e6, yeah, block the e file. Pawn d2. You want to take this knight. And with only pawns in hand, white resigns. Congratulations, pknm. You're through to the candidates. Let's have a quick look again at the decisive game here. because black was much better here. Up until he played bishop e7. Okay, so white got the attack. And he slipped up by taking on c7. Excellent find here. Pawn d2. Force the queen to take on d2 and then knight f3 check. White tried to postpone the inevitable. Pawn at c2 was the best, of course. Like this. Pawn here, rook takes, and pawn here. But what was the move here? Okay, so simply queen e8, yeah, and then take on g8, I suppose. Because this is one tempo short. And here, black is just winning. Knight at e1, okay. But surely this is winning as well. Check. Mate in 5. Mate in 6. Mate in 6. He should have taken with this knight, because this knight is covering an exit. No. And now the king can take on d5. Oh, this is horrible. The king got to join the attack. And boom. Queen g8. Mate. This was an exciting match, I'd say. And as I said, congratulations, pknm. Tomorrow we'll watch Zixan, hopefully. I say hopefully, going through, because Zixan is also a Swedish player like me. Thank you all for watching this. Hang on while I try to find some. Tomorrow we'll watch channel to raid. Let's join Anna Kramling, daughter of Pia Kramling, also from Sweden. Let's see what she's doing.